Terrifier was a movie about a clown, and Terrifier 2 is also a movie about a clown. But again. And apparently, a movie so gruesome and over the top with its subject matter that it's been causing people to vomit and pass out in the movie theatres. So basically, the perfect movie to watch with your grandma. So with that being said, get your grandma ready, tell her to hit the subscribe button, and let's see if Terrifier 2 is truly as gruesome as they say. The movie begins almost immediately after the events of the previous film, where Art goes from being unalived to doing the unaliving. After waking up from his impromptu lobotomy, Art the Clown decides that this morgue worker's coat would look a lot better in a dark shade of red. So after some slashing and bashing, he does his best Slipknot impression by pushing his fingers into his eyes and pulls out the man's brain, because you can never have too many of them. He gathers up various different medical supplies for what I can only assume is not medical reasons, before Art heads off to the laundromat, whips out his little Art, and silently laughs while reading about the tragic death of a family of 4. After having a good little chuckle at the thought of the Earth's overpopulation crisis being slightly decreased, he turns around to see a little girl clown, who then rather rudely proceeds to make a big mess on the floor, as if she was never taught the proper etiquette for not pissing blood all over the place. Another customer sleeping in the laundromat wakes up to see Art playing patty cake by himself as he lets everything hang loose because fresh air's good for you. And after cleaning up the puddle of internal clown fluid from the floor like the good functioning member of society that he is, Art does perhaps one of the most vile and horrific things he does in the movie. He puts his soaking wet clothes back on. Now I get why people were passing out. Oh, and he also thrusts the mop handle through the man's head for trying to cop a look earlier. And also because that man didn't refer to Art with his proper title, Lord Art the Clown. Because thanks to this video's sponsor, Established Titles, Art was able to purchase a plot of land in Scotland, and thanks to a historic Scottish custom, Art will now be referred to as Lord Art. Not only is Lord Art solving the overpopulation problem one person at a time, but he's also helping to preserve the natural woodlands of Scotland while helping global restoration efforts by having 1 tree planted with each purchase. Thanks to Established Titles working with global charities, 1 tree planted, and Trees for the Future to support global restoration efforts. And with his at least 1 square foot of land, he gets a certificate that features the unique plot number to identify the exact location of the land. And whether you want to officially change your name to Lord or Lady, or turn someone else into a Lord or Lady, Established Titles can do that. And if you wanted to, you could buy a couples pack with adjoining plots of land. Because people might say never get couples tattoos, but they certainly don't say never get a couples matching plot of land using the link in the description while using code BIGWILL for an additional 10% off on an already massive Black Friday sale. Not once has anyone ever said that, so you're good. And the first 200 people to purchase a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot. So click the link in the description for the Black Friday deal, and use code BIGWILL so we can build this big kingdom together. It then cuts to one of the main characters of the story, Sienna, as she's currently working on her Halloween costume. And later that evening, while eating with her family, we learn that her younger brother Jonathan wants to dress up as the clown who committed those 9 murders last year. Meaning that we've now either skipped ahead a year, or this kid's concept of time is deeply and utterly wrong. Sienna then falls asleep watching a commercial for the Clown Cafe, because nothing screams I really want a hamburger quite like someone being sliced vagina to ear. Sienna then wakes up on the set of the Clown Cafe commercial, clearly in some kind of dream, before Art appears and begins riding around on his iconic tricycle. He then proceeds to hand out candy to everyone, but when he gets to Sienna, he instead gives her a beating heart in a box. Because do you know how much sugar is in candy? So saving everyone from a life of diabetes, he pulls out a Tommy gun and mows them all down. With mostly everyone but Sienna dead, she decides that now would be a fun time to play on the slide, as Art proceeds to set the stragglers on fire, because that's just the type of guy that he is. And Sienna, with a serious case of post-massacre munchies, crawls her way over to a box of Art Krispies and reaches into the box to reminisce about the good old days where cereal would come with toys. Like a sword. Now in possession of what every teenage girl wants, she pulls out this deadly weapon for her to then wake up in the real world to notice that her house is in a state that it really shouldn't be in. On fire. It appears that she left a candle on, and now the wings from her costume are almost as burnt as those kids from her dream. She later returns to the room for a second healthy dose of smoke inhalation, and finds the sword her deceased father gave her. and then she caresses it for some weird reason. We see Art and his new friend enjoying an interview on TV of the severely mutilated survivor of the previous movie, which of course Art finds absolutely hilarious, because what could possibly be more funny than a severe disfigurement? Before we see Jonathan, already quite interested in Art the Clown, and all things Christian mums wouldn't approve of, come across Art and the clown girl in his school as they're casually hanging around in the corridor, playing with the insides of a dead animal. As you do. And after almost becoming a rather burnt baked potato in her sleep, Sienna's at the costume shop with her friend Ali to replace the wings that look like chicken wings that were left under the grill for too long. And as Ali walks away to take a call, which is totally unrealistic by the way, we all know our generation is far too scared to talk to people on the phone, Sienna spots Art, standing still and creepily staring at her as he blocks the doorway. But not blocking it very well apparently, as she's easily able to walk right past him and up to the counter to pay, where she then realises that she's left her bag in the other room with the guy who looks like he'd want to play around with your insides. And not in the good way. But as she does realise, Art suddenly drops her bag on the counter and walks away to look at some whoopee cushions. Who said chivalry was dead? Art then walks up behind Sienna to toot his little horn before the cashier confronts him, cause that's kinda weird, man. After being kind enough to let Sienna purchase her items and leave the store, Art locks the front door, hits the man with a bottle, drags him over the counter, and proceeds to thrust the broken bottle into his eye socket, turning it into more of an eye cavern. He then hacks at the skull with a cleaver and proceeds to chop off his head for good measure. Because much like the first Terrifier, this movie knows that it has awesome practical effects, and by God it's going to show you. And a little later on, Sienna's friend Ali from the store answers her front door to give some trick-or-treating kids some candy, for her doorbell to almost immediately ring again, where she then finds this unusually large trick-or-treating kid asking for some candy. And Ali, in her deeply disturbing ageist ways, refuses to give Art some candy because he's too old, which causes him to throw a bit of a tantrum and bang loudly on the door and ask again. So as she throws some candy at him, which is definitely the smart thing to do when this thing shows up at your door, she learns the importance of checking your kid's Halloween candy before you let them eat it, because some sick individual has gone and put a bloodied sore in Art's bag. Later that night, making do with her new, hopefully fireproof wings, Sienna's getting ready to go to a Halloween party, as we see Ali, alone in her house, also getting ready too. She hears a noise coming from her supposedly empty house, and upon investigation, she discovers that the back door has been shattered. Before said backdoor shatterer walks into the kitchen, pours himself a nice refreshing glass of water, and begins chasing Ali through the house for a bit of cardio. We learn that Art likes things a little rough. Perhaps a little too rough, as he slices down her face and through her eyeball, before taking a pair of scissors and proceeding to take a little off the top. With Ali now sporting her stylish new bold look, he cuts her back open and violently snaps her arm back and forth until he's able to pull it from her body as if it's a chicken wing and he's trying to get every last bit of skin. With her other arm, he turns her hand into two hands and begins violently slicing all over her body. Suddenly he gets up and decides to leave the room. With Ali still alive, but in a severely mangled state and in a serious need of a hand, she begins crawling to the phone. But just as you think that there might be a chance for her, much like a pit bull after the faintest possible whiff of a child to maul, Art returns with bleach in one hand and salt in the other. And like a slightly morbid yet curious kid with a slug, he proceeds to pour them both all over her open wounds to see what will happen. Later in the evening, Ali's mother returns home to the weird smell of bleach and salt in the air, as if someone's been cooking a rather questionable meal. She finds the shattered door and runs upstairs to find Art slicing chunks out of her corpse as if he's about to make a doner kebab. And with Art hysterically laughing, because once again, this is hilarious, Ali, still somehow alive, wakes up and says mum. I think what you're actually trying to say is ouch. Sienna makes it to the party with her other friend Brooke, and is slightly concerned about Ali's absence, desperately hoping that she hasn't been turned into some kind of salt bleach abomination. Before being introduced to Brooke's salt bleach abomination boyfriend, Jeff, Jonathan gets into an argument with his mother about the incident at school, where he's blamed for bringing the dead animal in, and not the psychotic killer clown on the loose. And after all she's done to her kids throughout the entire movie is shout at and berate them, she tears up Jonathan's late father's notebook in front of him and slaps him across the face. After having endured a bit too much child abuse for his likings, Jonathan runs out of the house, before we see his mother create the suburban soccer mum cocktail, a glass of wine and a handful of prescription pills. Because nothing takes the edge off, quite like good old-fashioned substance abuse. She hears the garage door open, and not quite sure if it's her drug-induced paranoia or an intruder, she goes to look, and finds her car vandalized with pumpkins, toilet paper and shaving cream. Well, it could be worse. It could be CPS. Back at the party, Sienna finds herself feeling pretty good, perhaps a bit too good for a few shots, until Brooke then admits to her that she spiked her drink with ecstasy like the good friend that she is, because best friends drug each other for fun. Jonathan, running through the streets like Phoebe from Friends, is beeped at by a creepy van. And after walking over to said creepy van, in hopes of there being free candy inside written on it, Jonathan finds the driver's seat empty. But after looking away and then looking back, he sees the young clown girl sitting in it, with her eyes glowing and looking like she should really get an optician appointment. I don't think that's normal. He then takes off running to get his daily steps in for the day, and we see his mother wipe away the shaving cream from the window to reveal Art sitting inside. And without warning, as fast as she slapped her son, he slapped her with a nice stress-relieving double-barrel blast to the face. After seeing terrifying demon clown girl, Jonathan returns home to discover his mum suffering from an unfortunate case of death before Art walks in wearing an apron and proceeds to force mashed potato into her already mashed face. And after turning to see the horrible sight of a child, Jonathan runs as Art chases after him with a syringe offering him free drugs. Jonathan reaches for Sienna's sword, but is injected with the substance before he can grab it for himself, which in the process causes Art to take interest in the object as it possesses two of his favourite qualities. It looks very sharp and would probably hurt a lot if you stab someone. And we see that Sienna's being driven home due to what appears to be a drug-induced psychotic episode. Nice one, Brooke. Before receiving a call from her brother, where he tells her that he's in trouble and that she needs to come and get him from the old carnival. For it to then be revealed that it's actually the little clown girl on the phone, and she's been working really hard on her impressions. Ah, good job, sweetie. After arriving at the carnival, Brooke and Jeff see no problem at all with letting their high, possibly suffering from some sort of psychotic break friend, walking off alone into the abandoned park. Before they decide to do some more drugs, because what else are you gonna do to pass the time when your only purpose in life is to be horrifically butchered in a horror movie? Jeff gets out to urinate, which Art takes great offense in, so responds by repeatedly stabbing him in the genitals, pulling them off, and showing his new toy to Brooke through the car window. He pulls her from the car, and she kicks him in the face and takes off running, before almost immediately forgetting the basic concepts of running and falling to the ground and cutting her leg open. And apparently she's over encumbered too, as she decides to take her boots off before continuing to run. Sienna hears Brooke call out to her, and we see Brooke enter a bathroom clearly worked on by the fabulous interior decorator known as Art the Clown, which is evident due to the sheer amount of human feces on the wall. He enters the number 2 room as well, so she arms herself with a piece of wood, but unluckily for her, Art also has a piece of wood. With knives. He throws acid all over her face and watches as the skin bubbles from the bone before proceeding to beat her with the sharp beating stick. He then busts open her kneecap and then plants it in her chest as if he's digging for gold. After tearing open her chest and eating her heart for a HP boost, Sienna finds her without a full face of makeup and an impromptu liposuction session. And as she drops to the floor with grief, Art is just standing there in the doorway, admiring his handiwork. And just as he begins to approach her, Jonathan walks in behind him, giving Sienna the opportunity to drive a nail into his leg so her brother can run. He throws her around the poo-poo room, and after knocking her unconscious, he goes after Jonathan. And after waking up, running on nothing but adrenaline and Molly, she reaches for the spiked bat. And as Art has caught Jonathan, slicing him up and finding the idea of an injured 12-year-old kid to be absolutely hilarious, Sienna sneaks up behind him and begins hitting him with the bat. She plants it into the back of his skull, but he brushes it off as if it's nothing more than a mere annoyance. Damn kids these days and their spiked bats. Art begins whipping Jonathan, as he's clearly a strong believer in corporal punishment, and after getting in the way to protect her brother, Sienna manages to take the whip and turn it onto him. She tears off a chunk of his face with it, and then stabs him through the skull with a metal rod, as if she's playing a game of pin the tail on the donkey, but really, really wrong. And when she thinks she's finally done, he suddenly jumps up and takes her to the floor, and while he's strangling her, Jonathan pulls the mum blaster from Art's sock and shoots him through the gut with it. And while Art is filled with more holes than your favourite pair of boxers, Sienna wakes up to find her mum comforting her. But us as the viewers know that her mother is suffering from this little known condition called "my head has fallen off." It turns out to just be a clown version of her mother, and as soon as she touches Sienna, she sees exactly what happened to her head and why it's no longer attached. Albeit an incredibly fast TikTokified version of what happened, but she dead. She wakes up to find Art standing over her brother's unconscious body, because apparently Art will squander literally every opportunity he has to kill this little weirdo. So he grabs her by the throat and pushes her through a hole in the ground. And as she once again regains consciousness, suffering from her 7th concussion of the night, she's got brain damage, but also finds another hole in the ground that's contained in the original hole in the ground. And as she stands up, Art stabs her with her own sword, and she falls backwards down into the pit as he drops it on the ground. And instead of being, dead, the thing that kind of happens after being stabbed with a sword, Sienna finds herself trapped in some kind of water tank, like a freakish fish at the aquarium, and she looks through the glass to realise that she's on the set of the Clown Cafe commercial and things are looking kinda weird. Jonathan wakes up to Art helping himself to a finger sandwich, when suddenly, Sienna's sword begins to light up as if it's a really strange episode of Power Rangers, which somehow gives her the power to climb out of the pit, get up and stab Art. With her new Power Ranger powers that I don't quite understand, she hacks into his neck, slices his throat, and finally decapitates him. I don't remember the Pink Ranger doing that. And while she's hugging her younger brother, confused as to why there's an Art-sized bite in his hand, they both look up to see the little girl clown. She looks at Art's head, picks it up, and begins laughing as if he's just told her a top-tier dad joke. And after cradling his head like a baby, she walks away and the movie ends. Except it doesn't end, and there's a mid-credit scene that shows Victoria, the severely mutilated survivor from the first movie, having a rather heavy flow as she proceeds to write profanities all over the wall in vagina blood. She's pregnant, and she's also written Vicky and Art on the wall encased in a love heart. Which, I don't know, sounds kinda toxic to me, to be honest. Before proceeding to do something that I'd highly advise against pregnant people doing, and starts pulling her own internal organs out of her body, for a nurse to then discover that she's quite literally birthed an Art the Clown head. And then the movie ends. Before we finish up, I'd like to just give a big thank you to all of my YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month help keep this channel going, because YouTube has a habit of making it really hard for movie content creators to exist on this site. A perk of becoming a YouTube member or a patron is getting access to the private Discord, which also in turn gives you access to all uncensored versions of videos. So if you'd like to see this video and others without all the blurring and censoring, then maybe consider checking that out. So starting with the YouTube members, a big thank you to Laurie Resendiz, Cal Ballinger, Billy Bad Cables, Gary Braunbeck, Psycho, Cobe Redbeam, Exgerticus, Mike Violic, MG, Cyan's Gaming, Peanuts, Goobs AU, JulieNot666, The Skeptic Eleptic, and R. Mendez. And heading over to the patrons, a big thank you to Dom, Hunters263, Rebecca Pitts, The Dandy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Jared C. Bees, Pascal Mathis, Fighting the Pirates, Richard McGowan III, Macy J., Chris, Dennis, Wade Knott, Ashley L. Wintz, Christopher Budsky, Joshua Torres, Remy, Fire Goes Fast, Josh Brooks, Dyreem, Robert Zerweck, Dark Shiva, Josh Hannon, Billy Whitaker, Axel Not Chicken Imp, Jay Slows, Daniel Dickinson, Donnie Do Work, G-Sauce, Fatty Ghost, Miguel, Owen, Mackenzie Riley, Bryson, John Smith, Madrick, Andrew Miranda, Scott Scherberger, Stephen Weber, Channing Mars, Arnav Singh, Michael Atikpur, Shelby, Benjamin Bronson, Ryan Trowbridge, Jan Nicholas Roher, Banklogs, Paul Bartlett, Reese Heinrich, Rye the Guy, Toast is Hot 1, Nazdan, Todd, Benedette Garum, and FX666. So once again, a massive thank you to all YouTube members and Patreons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.